Hi, this is Northern Oklahoma College Algebra Math 1513, Chapter 2, Section 1. We're going to find the center and radius of a circle equation that's written in general form, and we're going to have to complete the square to do this. Alright, we are used to dealing with equations that are written in this nice standard form, is what we call it, standard form. And we like standard form because it's easy to spot the coordinates of the center and the radius. So we like standard form. But what if they give it to you in general form, like this mess? Alright, this is the equation of a circle. It's just not written real pretty in standard form. It's written in general form, which means pretty much it's a mess. Everything's all scattered out. So we have no idea from looking at this what the center and the radius are. We're going to have to reorganize everything and rearrange all the terms so that it looks more like our standard form up here. Now, the strategy we're going to use is called completing the square. And we call it this because we're going to rewrite and reorganize until we have all the x expressions squared and the y expressions squared. Alright, that's why we call it completing the square. We're going to rewrite it and reorganize it so that we have x squared and y squared, basically. Alright, our first step is to kind of get the x's together and get the y's together. So I'm going to put my x squared and my minus 4x together. Now I'm going to leave a little space right here because I'm fixing to complete the square. I'm going to add that special number right there that'll make it break into something squared. Now at the same time I'm going to collect my y's. So there's my y squared and there's my plus 2y. Now what am I going to do with that negative 20? I've dealt with everything up there except the negative 20. Well, what I'm going to do with it is just move it to the other side. So I'm going to add 20 to both sides and make that 20 go away because really it's just in the way. I forgot to say on my y terms I'm leaving a space there so I can complete the square on them as well. Here's my equals, and since I added 20 to the right side I now have 20 on the right. So that minus 20 that was on the left is now on the right. Alright, a little refresher course on completing the square. How do I complete the square? I take half the x term. Now what's the term by the x? Negative 4. So half of negative 4 is going to be negative 2. And then I take that negative 2 and I square it. When you square negative 2, you get a positive 4 because negative 2 times a negative 2 is a positive 4. What do I do with this? That's my magic number that I'm going to put right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 4. Alright, and I have to remember to add 4 on the right side as well to keep everything balanced. Remember, we have an equation, so if you add 4 pounds to the left, you got to add 4 pounds to the right to keep it all balanced. Let's do the same thing with the y. I want to know what the perfect number is to add there, so I take half the x term, or I'm sorry, the y term, half the y term, so half of 2 is 1, and then I take that 1 and square it, and I still get 1. What do I do with my magic number? I put it right there in that space I was saving for it. So I'm going to add 1. Since it's a positive 1, think add 1. Don't forget to add 1 on the right as well. So we added 4 to the x's and we added 1 to the y's. And at the same time we added 4 and 1 on the right side of the equal sign. Alright, here's where we're at. We added 4 to the x's and we added 1 to the y's. And we added it on the right side, and I already added those together for you to get 25. So you can see that we're getting close to having x, minus something squared plus y minus something squared equals 25. You can kind of see where we're headed. That's where we're headed. We're trying to get this thing in standard form. So why did I add 4 to the x's? Because now it will factor perfectly into something times itself. I need two numbers that when I multiply them I get positive 4, but when I add them I get negative 2. And since we're trying to square something, it's going to be the same number. So what two numbers can I multiply to get positive 4, but when I add them I get negative 4? That's going to be negative 2. So x minus 2 times another x minus 2 I can write as x minus 2 squared. Remember, that's what we were going for. We were completing the square. We wanted to write it as something squared. Now here's a hint for you. How do you find that number? You remember when we took half of the x term and we got negative 2? That's a little hint for you. That's a quick way to find that number that goes in the parentheses. You can sit here and think about, you know, now how do I break that down? How do I factor that out? Or you can use this little trick here. That first step we did gives you the number that goes in the parentheses. The second step gives you that number that we added on the end there. All right, let's go over to the y and do the same thing. So I have y, and I'm factoring it, and I realize that y plus 1 times y plus 1 is what I'm looking for, because I want two numbers that when I multiply them I get 1, but when I add them I get 2. That has to be positive 1, positive 1. I can write y plus 1 a shorter way as y plus 1 squared. That needs to be a plus. So I have x minus 2 squared plus y plus 1 squared equals 25. And now that I have it in standard form, it's easy to pick out the center and the radius. The center is going to be a positive 2 and a negative 1. And our radius, since 25 is 5 squared, our radius is going to be 5. So reorganize, complete the square, get it in standard form, and then you can just read the center and radius. All right, and here's one that works out not quite so nicely, but still okay. All right, remember the first thing we're going to do, this is written in general form, the first thing we're going to do is gather our x's together. There's my x squared. Now I have a 10x that's negative, so I'm going to put it right beside the x squared. Then I'm going to leave a space for that magic number so I can complete the square. Next I have my plus y squared, and I'm going to put the y term right beside it. I have a positive 2y, and I'm going to leave a space because I'm going to complete the square on the y as well. Now if you notice, I've taken care of everything here. I've dealt with the x squared and the x and the y squared and the y. I got that 18 in the way, so we need to just move it out of the way. I'm going to minus 18 from both sides. So I have a negative 18 on the right, and we need to complete the square on the left. Now remember the trick on completing the square. I want half of the number by the x. That's negative 5. And then I want to square the negative 5. That'll give me a magic number. So our magic number up here is plus 25. That completes the square. Don't forget to add 25 to the right. All right, now since we're talking about it, you guys remember I told you a hint that the result of that first step, that's what's going to be in your parentheses. So when I factor my x, if you want to take a shortcut, just jump right here to x minus 5. See, that's where I got that number just right off the bat. X minus 5 squared. There's a little shortcut for you. Okay, let's go back to the y. And how do we complete the square on the y? I take half the number by the y, the 2. That gives me 1. And I square the 1. That still gives me 1. So I'm going to add 1. That's my magic number. That completes the square on the y. And don't forget to add 1 on the right. Okay, so I am completing the square on the y. What number goes there? You remember the little trick. It's going to be a positive 1 goes there. So y plus 1 squared is what this factored down into. And x minus 5 squared is what this factored into nicely. We added the perfect number. We completed the square so that we could write the x term as something squared and the y term as something squared. Now let's finish our standard form over here. We got negative 18 plus 25 plus 1. That's going to be a positive 8. Okay, let's see if we can figure out our center. It's just our h and k. So our center is positive 5 and negative 1. Remember, this is y minus negative 1. So our k is negative 1. This is x minus 5, so that's our h. So h and k, 5, negative 1. What is our radius? Well, our radius, 8 has to be something squared. Another way of thinking about that is our r is the square root of 8. All right, if we think, what's the root of 8? Now, r can be simplified. Square root of 8 can be simplified to square root of 4, square root of 2. So r in the simplified expression is 2 radical 2. Here's our center. Here's our radius, 2 radical 2. Let me see, I didn't really care for the way I explained how to find the r. Let me take one more shot at it. We knew that r squared is 8. So how did I get square root of 8? All I did was square root both sides. So r equals plus or minus the square root of 8. Now remember, we're talking about distance, so we're going to ignore the negative answer. We're just going to deal with the positive answer. After that, I just simplified it to 2 square root of 2. I think you understood that probably. All right, and finally, one of your last questions is kind of like a puzzle where we put all this information together from Chapter 2. It says a circle has a diameter with endpoints at 2, 3, and negative 4, 11, and they want you to write the equation of that. Well, let's just get a visual of what we're dealing with. And this is not drawn to scale, so 2, 3 is going to be right about there, and negative 4, 11, negative 4, that's going to be 4 steps to the left and 11 up. Now again, this isn't drawn to scale because I didn't leave enough room. But they're talking about a circle that goes through those 2 points and has that as a diameter. So they're going to have a center here in between those 2 points. And you have to figure out how to find what you need to write an equation. Remember, what we need to write an equation, we need the center and we need the radius. Okay, let's think about how we can find that. If this is negative 4, 11, and this is 2, 3, how could I find the center right here? How could I find C? Well, if I knew how far it was between these 2 points, if I knew the distance between those 2 points, I could find well, actually I'm talking about radius. I got off track. If I could find the distance between these 2 points, if I knew how far it was from negative 4, 11 to 2, 3, if I knew this distance and cut it in half, I would have the radius. So there's a hint of how to find your radius. Now, how do I find the center? The center is going to be halfway in between those 2 points. And what did we just learn in this chapter? What's halfway in between 2 points? That's called the midpoint. So you have 2 things to do. Find the distance and cut it in half. That'll give you your radius for your circle. And to find the center, we're actually talking about a point that's halfway between negative 4, 11 and 2, 3. That's called the midpoint. So use those 2 formulas, pull out that information, and then plug it into your standard equation for a circle, and you're done.